Hello, everybody. My name's Kirsty. Um, I am doing my research project on database migration, specifically the events leading up to a data migration project in a business. The topics I'd like to cover today are the definition, some risks and motivation associated with database migration, as well as the decisions that can be made after you've analyzed your current database state. Hopefully, if I keep it under the 5 minutes, we'll have some time for questions. So database migration is the process of moving the schema, data, and applications associated with the current system to a different technology or platform. I wanted to emphasize that it's not equivalent to data migration. And a good example is if you have a business running and you've got live data and you've decided that you want to provide the finance team with, say, some analytical reports, you would take relevant data and move it into a newly introduced data warehouse. A database migration project, in contrast, is say you already have this data warehouse in place providing these solutions to your finance team, but for whatever reason it's not running optimally anymore. You may need to purchase or install a new database warehouse. By doing that, you're going to have to migrate all your data as well as all the applications associated with it. That is database migration. So there's lots of risks involved with a database migration project. First and foremost is the notoriously low success rate. Forbes magazine reported that of the 2,000 companies that underwent database migration projects in 2007, 84% of those reported that the project was a failure. Failure meaning that they went extremely over budget and extremely over time. That's scary. The next risk is it's quite expensive. This graph here shows you how much it costs by industry to have downtime. That dotted line there is an average of 102 minutes. So those are just operational downtime. When you start to consider that you might be undergoing a database migration project, you can look anywhere between an hour to 10 hours additional downtime. So that $1 million value there becomes extremely big as the amount of downtime grows. The last risk I wanted to touch on was the fact that a new database system is essentially uncharted territory. The business processes that you've come accustomed to and put into place takes advantage of your current database model's flaws and features and exposes them and to run optimally. When you have a new database system in place, you're unsure of the little quirks that come with it. So even though a business process can be developed in theory, it's not always going to work that way in practice. And you won't know until the database model is in place for any given amount of time. So if it's risky, what's the point of doing a database migration project? Why not just stay where you are? So some motivating bullet points here are, say you have your data distributed across multiple databases. You may want to consolidate that. It could be because one of the vendors, so technology changes, one of the vendors of those databases, say, has gone bankrupt or is no longer providing support for that line of business. So you may not have a choice but to migrate. Another thing is cost and efficiency. Actually, I'll bucket those into one. During our last unit, we discussed how physical databases are being replaced by cloud-based solutions and the cost savings and efficiency gains that come along with that. So that might be something that's motivating for a business. The last motivational point I wanted to make was experimentation. The only reason I bring this up is because it's one of those things that I don't think it's a good motivator. I've worked with some CIO technophiles out there who just basically wanted to introduce a new technology because they wanted something shiny and new to play with. So sometimes it's not always a good motivator, which brings me to my next slide, actually. So once you've analyzed the current state of your database management system, I've categorized the outcomes into what I've been calling the 3 R's, remain, refactor, and replace. So I attended a seminar, a MySQL seminar earlier this year. One of the keynote speakers said that a database management system is running optimally if your labor cost is 50% of what it cost you to initially install that system in the first place. So you want to remain with your current system if you are in that window. So one of the, if your motivating factor is purely experimental, it may not be a good idea for the business. When that number starts to creep up and your labor cost increases, you may start to consider that an upgrade is in order. So one example I was using was MySQL, or Microsoft SQL 2005 sometimes doesn't play nice with newer Microsoft products. So when that starts to become a bit of a pain, you could consider moving to Microsoft SQL 2012. The last one is when your labor cost starts to become really unproportional. You may need to replace the system altogether. So a good example of this is when, if you're changing the schema of a relational database model often, it's really painful to do that. So you may want a more flexible solution. It may be in your best interest to move to a more flexible solution like NoSQL, so that you're not spending so much time maintaining the database, but instead, using it, using it optimally. Remain, refactor, replace. So that actually brings me to my last slide. So I powered through that pretty quick, but the bottom line is I'm trying to, on the other side of my research, I hope to provide a standardized guideline for investigating your current database model system state and deciding, given a standardized list, what needs to happen. Should you stay or should you migrate? And if you should migrate, is it an upgrade approach or is it a full-on replace? That's my research. I want to thank you all for listening, taking the 7 minutes and 56 seconds I've taken to deliver this. And is there any questions?